So in this video, we're going to talk about the issue of gender language from an interesting situation. The ACLU pretty recently posted on Twitter this quote from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it's interesting, if you look very closely here at this quote, you'll notice that there are some bracketed words. And this ties into the whole subject of gender language. And Neil Shenvi actually commented on this, and he posted this here. He said, "The ACLU edits RBG to bring her speech up to code. The right side of history must be appeased." So here's the quote from the ACLU that I showed you next to the original quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And you'll notice that what she actually said is the decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life, but it has been updated in brackets to a person's life. And then they go on from there and just use those generic pronouns and refer to women as person or people. Now that really does tie into the subject of gender language, which I talk about on this channel periodically in reference to Bible translation, because people will bring up the issue of gender language in relationship to how we translate the Bible into English. I think what this whole situation brings up, and this is a really important point to note, is that gender language can have an ideological motive behind it. We see that clearly here in this situation because obviously the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was talking about biological women. But because of a worldview here that the ACLU is espousing, it's really a value system that they're espousing, they actually did change her language. Now, some people are defending this and saying, well, they put it in brackets and they made it very clear that they were changing the wording, but that's not really the point. The point is that's not actually the worldview and the way that Ruth Bader Ginsburg presented this whole statement. She was specifically talking about women, biological women, but they had to change it because of their worldview and their value system. And that's what Neil Shenvi is bringing out. The ACLU edits RBG to bring her speech, as he says, up to code. So I think what all this says, and it's a good lesson for us, is that when it comes to translating the Bible, it is something we need to be careful of. We need to be looking for ideological agendas, even when it comes to something like gender language. This really does show us that there can be a danger in the way that gender language is presented. Now, I'm okay to some degree with gender accurate language, that if the biblical writer was referring to men and women and someone wants to translate that in a more generic way to reflect what the original author intended, that's okay to some degree. But I think it's great and important, in my opinion, to have translations that maintain the original wording. At least some translations that are up to date need to maintain the original wording of the writers so that we can spot ideological agendas if translations are changing gender language in a way that is not really reflective of the original author's point of view. So this is an extreme example in our day, but it does show us that gender language can be used in ideological ways very clearly. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not someone who is conservative in any way, and she was actually pushing for progressive rights. But what we're seeing here is that even her language had to be changed to fit the ideological agenda for today. So it really does speak to the issue of gender language, and the way that people handle gender language is a very important thing. And I just wanted to throw some thoughts out there on this because I thought it was very interesting in and of itself, but especially as it applies to Bible translation, because gender language is an issue when it comes to Bible translation. What I am trying to say is that I do think it's okay. I'm going to reiterate this. It's okay for some translations to try to be gender accurate, but what we're seeing here is actually gender inaccurate, And I do think that could even happen in Bible translation because of an ideological agenda. I also would say I think it's important to have Bible translations that maintain the wording of the original, even if it is very masculine-centered language, because it helps us to understand the viewpoint and the worldview and the way that the original authors conveyed things. Even if we might say today, well, it's not gender accurate, it still is reflective of their point of view. And that's something that you can see here. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a certain point of view, and that is being obscured by the way that this quote is being portrayed. I apologize for all the background noise in this video. Still a lot of construction going on in my area, but I hope that this video has been interesting. Again, I would love to hear your thoughts on these things in the comment section, but thank you so much for taking some time to listen to some of my thoughts on this topic, brought to you from A Frisch Perspective.